Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Welcome if you are new. My name is Heather. I'm a homeschooling mom of 3 kids, elementary, middle, and high school age. If you are not subscribed, I would love for you to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you are notified of all of my future videos. Today is going to be all about the books that I read in January. I read a lot of books. I'm really excited to share them with you. If you are interested in more book discussion, I do have posts every month on my Patreon page, one for fiction and one for nonfiction, where we can talk about all of the books that we're reading, ask for recommendations, that kind of thing. I will leave a link for my Patreon group in the description box if you're interested in checking it out. So let's get started. Okay, guys. I read a lot of books in January, and I actually finally got my my reading journal mostly set up. I do have a video of setting up January on my YouTube channel, but man, it took me a very long time to draw out all of these calendar spreads. I really do love bullet journaling. I think it is super functional and it works really well, especially as for my reading journal. But man, setting up those calendar pages was a lot. It was a lot. And honestly, I probably don't even need to have these, but what I like to do is write down when books are coming out by authors that I already read. Do I need to have that? Probably not. I probably really only need these pages, but yeah. I was going to film it for you, but then I realized even with a time lapse, it would be so incredibly long. So I didn't film it, but I am going to tell you about the books that I read this month, how many, the breakdown of the types of books, and then I'm going to share some of my favorites and 5-star reads with you. There is a little bit of overlap between favorites and 5-star reads. Not every 5-star read is a favorite though, because sometimes I will read a kid's book to my kids and I think it's a 5-star read, but it's not one of my favorites for the month. So in January, my stats were I read 23 books, 12 were fiction and 11 were nonfiction. I read a lot more nonfiction in January, usually the first quarter of the year, mainly because I'm thinking about goals, I'm thinking about personal developments, I'm thinking about homeschool things that I want to accomplish throughout the year, and I really enjoy personal development books. I always have. I do a lot of reading about parenting and homeschooling methods and all of that stuff, which you will see come out a little bit in some of my favorites this month. So for the breakdown of the types of books, I read 10 audiobooks this month, which is really high for me. I don't typically read that many audiobooks in a month. I use the Hoopla app from my library, which is free, and then I also use Audible. I have an Audible subscription, so I have access to the Audible Plus library, and I really enjoy that. I didn't read a ton of Audible books this month, but I get 10 borrows through Hoopla, and I tend to use them each month. I don't always listen to that many audiobooks, but I did this month because I had a lot of cleaning and reorganization projects that I was working on. I cleaned out my kitchen and my pantry, and when I'm doing those things, I listen to audiobooks. I used to listen to a lot more podcasts, but I don't really listen to podcasts anymore. I'm primarily audiobooks or music. So it was a lot of audiobooks this month. And then I read 9 ebooks and 4 physical books. I love to read on my Kindle Paperwhite. I do most of my fiction reading there. I do it mostly after everybody has gone to bed, when I'm in bed, which is why I like the Paperwhite, because it has the backlight. So that is the breakdown, my monthly stats. Now I'm going to go through some of my favorites with you. The first one that I have is From Lukov with Love by Mariana Zapata, and this is a reread for me. I think it's the 3rd time that I've read it, and I think that the last 2 times that I read it were also in January 2021 and 2022. She writes really, really long, slow burn romance books. I love all of her books. They're really great. And this seems like a good book for January. It is about 2 people who are joining up to skate pairs for figure skating and their journey. I really love that book. So if you're interested in Mariana Zapata, that book is really good. Culty is really good. The Wall of Winnipeg and Me is also really good. I like all of those books. The next book was A Long Time Coming by Megan Quinn. I really enjoy her books quite a bit. This is another romance. And then the next book is A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. I read ACOTAR I think in December is when I read it, November, December of 2022. And that was my second time reading A Court of Thorns and Roses. I have a love-hate relationship with that book. So I read it for the first time, I think in 2021. If you have not read A Court of Thorns and Roses, you may want to fast forward a little bit because I will talk about a little bit of spoilery things. I will try and put timestamps maybe in the description box so that you can jump ahead. But A Court of Mist and Fury is the second book in the ACOTAR series. A Court of Thorns and Roses follows Tamlin and Feyre. Tamlin is the Spring Court High Fae, and Feyre is a human that is taken to live with Tamlin because she shoots and kills another Fae in a wolf form, which is against the treaty that they have. Anyways, throughout that whole book, they are building this relationship for Tamlin and Feyre, and I was invested, even though Tamlin is a jerk, and you kind of see some redeeming qualities. And then what happens is book 2 comes along, and Rhys enters the forefront of the book, and obviously you know that that is the primary relationship. So when I read ACOTAR originally and then found out what happened in A Court of Mist and Fury, because I like to know what I'm getting into sometimes, I was really irritated because I had invested my mind in this relationship between these two characters and it didn't work out. So, but I loved A Court of Mist and Fury, and going into it this time, reading the series, knowing that I could not be interested in the Tamlin-Feyre relationship as much, it was very helpful. It's similar to me when I went through and read The Hunger Games. I was Team Gale. I'm still kind of Team Gale, actually, but then finding out all of the stuff that happened through the Hunger Games series. Again, if you haven't read Hunger Games, I'm sorry that I just spoiled stuff for you. The relationship between Katniss and Peeta, and Katniss and Gale, it was just, I had such a hard time with that, and I was really irritated until I went through and read it a second time. And then I felt much better about it. So I loved A Court of Mist and Fury, and then I did also read A Court of Wings and Ruin, and I thought that it was pretty good. It was a good ending for this arc, this story arc. I have not read, I think she has 2 other books in this series. I think one is focused on, I don't know if one is on one sister and one is on the other. Nesta, I don't find any redeeming qualities in her at all and have no desire to read anything about her. So that's why I'm kind of done with ACOTAR at this point. Will I come back to it at some point? Perhaps. The reason I started reading Sarah J. Maas and her backlist, I read the Throne of Glass series over this past year, which was very, very long. I think the last book is like almost 1,000 pages. It was my longest book read last year because I read the first Crescent City book in January maybe of last year, and then realized that that series wasn't completed. And I hate to start series. I'm traumatized by Harry Potter because I only when I started reading Harry Potter, only 4 books were out, and then the 5th book came out. Then I had to wait for 6 and 7, and that was a traumatic experience for me. Anyways, I really enjoyed A Court of Mist and Fury. The next 2 books are by Elizabeth O'Rourke, and they are parallel and intersect. It is about this girl who can time jump into different timelines of her life, and it was really interesting. It is a 4-book series, but the first 2 books are about one couple, and the second 2 books are about, I believe, her mother, and her story, like the background story. I really, really liked these books. I wasn't sure that I would enjoy them. I do like time travel type stuff. I love Back to the Future. I loved all of the Marvel Endgame stuff, but I wasn't sure I would enjoy it in book format. I don't know why. I just didn't know how I would feel. I read Waking Olivia last year by Elizabeth O'Rourke, which is not at all like Parallel and Intersect, and it was an amazing book. It was really sad. There's a lot of sad in that book, and I just didn't know how it would translate into this very different type of book. Parallel and Intersect are very different than Waking Olivia, but I loved them. It kept me up to like 3 a.m. 2 nights in a row so I could get through those books. I was dead to the world. And that actually might be part of the reason that I did not get as much planning done for homeschooling the week of Martin Luther King Jr. week. If you saw my homeschool update on Monday, I talked about how my Sunday planning is normally on Sunday, but I pushed it off until Monday during the week of Martin Luther King Jr. That day, and our week was not as good. But I think part of that might have been my lack of sleep because I was up so late reading, but definitely recommend those. And then the next two of my favorites are nonfiction reads. The first is The Wild and Free Family by Ainsley Arment. And I read her first book, The Call of the Wild and Free, which I really enjoyed, but because I have been homeschooling so long, I think, did it come out last year in 2020? I'm not entirely sure which year it came out, but was it before that? I think I read it for the first time in maybe early 2021 or maybe late 2020. I can't quite remember, but it wasn't very applicable to me because I had already been 10 years into homeschooling at that point. I think that it was an encouraging book, and I definitely recommend it to people who are considering homeschooling or who have their kids in public school and are thinking about pulling them. I think it's really, really good for that, but there wasn't anything in there that changed my thinking or motivated me to do something different. But Wild and Free Family, I really enjoyed a lot of what she said. Now, I've read some reviews that people prefer The Call of the Wild and Free, but I think that just because it was less about homeschooling and how to start homeschooling and more about family culture, I think that's why it really drew me in. Creating a family culture of a love of learning and lifelong learning and seeking out new information is something that's very important to me. And so a lot of the little tidbits in this book felt very applicable to me, especially because she has kids that are in high school, and I think that she's graduated one now. So a little bit more of that, some of those personal stories of later in life, in some of the stages that I am in now with kids in high school, I think that was very helpful to me. One of the quotes right at the beginning of the book that I loved was, "A family culture starts with a vision, a picture of what you want it to be. It becomes a North Star, guiding the decisions you make and providing a helpful navigation for what you will or will not do." I think this quote resonated with me because I want to make room for the things that we all find important in our family. I've been talking a lot about passion projects in our Patreon community the past couple of weeks, making sure that we are living out our own passions in front of our kids so that they get permission, or they feel like they have permission to pursue their own passions, as well as figuring out a way to support your kids in their passions, even if it's something like video games, which my son has a huge passion for video games, and that has translated into him learning a lot of coding and creating his own video games and working on character development for stories within games. We're a big Legend of Zelda family, and so all of those stories are really important. And building that in the gameplay itself is important. And so I want to encourage my kids to live out their passions and helping them find the tools and resources they need in order to do that. I think also it was just it was just another person giving me permission. Not that I need permission, but saying that it is okay to put value on things that other people don't value. And I think that especially in homeschooling, that can be a challenge. And it's not something that I struggle with in the elementary and middle school years, but I have noticed it was something when I first started homeschooling 12 years ago that I struggled with. But as I have gotten into the high school years, some of that concern and comparison and it has crept back into my life a little bit, and I don't want it there. I know that we are completely off the beaten path. My family, we make very strange choices, and we love those choices and are happy about those choices. But sometimes you think, is this really okay for me to do? Or should I not be doing it? And even reading, the amount of books that I read in a month, people are probably sometimes like, oh, really? That is a lot of books. That's a lot of books. It is a lot of books, but it's something that I just have a huge passion for, and I want to spend the time doing that. So I do that. The next book that is also nonfiction was The Modern Miss Mason by Leah Bowden. I believe that this book came out in January. I definitely enjoyed it quite a bit. I haven't written down, I do have a notes section in my reading journal, but I am behind on taking notes of all of the things. There were so many good nuggets of information in A Modern Miss Mason. When I read books that are nonfiction like that, personal development books, all of that kind of stuff, I read through it once and then I go back through and annotate. I don't annotate it the first time I'm reading through it because I really just want to absorb all of the information and get a good feeling of the book overall. But then I do need to go back and finish that. I also need to finish annotating Wild and Free Family, which I have not done yet. Hopefully I will get to work on that at some point soon. So those were my favorites of the month. Then my 5-star reads were A Court of Mist and Fury, The One Thing, which is by Gary Keller, I think, yes. And that is a nonfiction book. It's a reread for me pretty much yearly. It's where he talks about focusing on one thing and really not letting a lot of distractions come in and protecting your time when you are working on projects that need your attention. Instead of flitting from one thing to another, really focusing for several hours on your most important task and giving it the time and attention it needs without distraction. Is that always an easy thing to do? Absolutely not. Especially as a homeschool mom, I know that that's very challenging for me to deep dive on one thing personally. But I do use a lot of block scheduling, and part of the reason is because I read this book many years ago and realized I need to be not trying to multitask. Multitasking means that you are not doing any one thing well. You are spreading yourself too thin. There are some things that you can multitask on. For instance, I talked about listening to an audiobook while cleaning. Well, I'm mindlessly cleaning, so if my mind is focused on the audiobook while I'm cleaning, that's totally okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And that is a case of multitasking in a good light. But multitasking, when you're trying to homeschool, when you're trying to get laundry done and folded, when you're trying to check emails, when you're trying to get dinner started, if you're trying to do all of those things at the same time, homeschool is going to take a lot longer. Getting your meal prepped is going to take a lot longer. Getting your laundry done is going to take a lot longer. Whereas if you have certain blocks of time where you say, I'm just focused on homeschooling during this block, nothing else is going to be part of my day during this block of time, everybody's more efficient. The same thing with cleaning, the same thing with pretty much anything. If you are able to block off a certain amount of time and work on that one thing, you make more progress. So I love that book. If you've not read it, I definitely recommend it. The next 5-star read was From Lukov with Love, which I talked about. It was one of my favorites. The next was Simply Clean by Becky Rapenchuk. She is from Clean Mama. I got this book from the library at the recommendation of one of my patrons in my Patreon group. She follows the Clean Mama cleaning system, and I loved it. And then I had to return it, and I really want to purchase my own copy so that I can go in, make notes. I want to get some of her printables. I have been using the home planner from Passionate Penny Pincher to try and get into a good home management system this year, and I've struggled a little bit. So I've been reading a bunch of different books, trying to organize my home better. I'm trying to make it into a space where I know where things are, that I'm not storing things that we don't use. It's a whole process. It's part of my goals for 2023. And so that was really, really good. I definitely want to buy it, but I'm trying to do this no spend, low spend thing. I don't know. The next book, A Long Time Coming by Megan Quinn, then Parallel and Intersect by Elizabeth O'Rourke. I also listened to the Big Book of 30-Day Challenges. I love a 30-day challenge. I feel like sometimes it can be really stressful to do those, but I noticed, so in November, this past November, I participated in NaNoWriMo, which if you do not know, it is National Novel Writing Month, where you go in and the goal is to write a 50,000 word novel. Starting on November 1st, I did 0 prep work for it, and I did meet that goal. I did not finish the book, but I did finish the goal of the 50,000 words. And my kids, we've been doing it as part of our homeschool English and language arts curriculum for 6 years. I think this was our 6th year participating. And my kids, I think they wrote over 10,000 words in their, Emma and Jack wrote over 10,000 words in their novels, and Lucy wrote about 1,000 words. So, and when I say wrote, she dictated to me and I typed it on the computer. Emma and Jack do their own typing, but Lucy does dictation and I am typing it for her. There were a bunch of different challenges broken down by category. There were fitness challenges, food-related challenges, home management challenges, reading challenges, all kinds of different things. And I thought it was really interesting. It was a super quick read. I listened to it on audio when I was folding laundry one day and just trying to get some new ideas. I think that those types of projects, when I have a focus for the month, especially with all of my goal setting that I do over here, I do try to focus on one thing for the month ahead. And if there is something that I'm trying to do every day, it works out better. Now, when I look at a year and I say I want to do something every day for a year, it doesn't work. But if I say I want to do everything for a month, it does work. So it just gave me some new ideas. Nothing that I'm going to be implementing anytime soon, but I think maybe for the summer, I might choose a couple of those challenges just to have something fun to do. Yes, so that was another 5-star read. And then the last 5-star read was Wild and Free Family, which again, I really, really enjoyed that. I did have one DNF this month that I DNF'd at 59%, and it was The Intern by Marnie Mann. It was awful. I could not finish it. And I read so much of it and I was just like, why am I still reading this? It's really not great. I didn't have too many 3-star reads this month. I did The Future is Analog, which is the first book that I read this year by David Sachs. It was a nonfiction book. I have pages of notes about all the things that I thought he was saying wrong with regards to education, and mainly that you have to live in the city to have a fulfilling life. It seemed like it was he lives in a bubble and doesn't have any experience outside of that bubble, but it was kind of all about his experience during COVID. I would be interested to read his first book, which is another book about analog living, but I think it came out in 2017, so it probably would be very different. than this book, which I felt like was a COVID memoir and not very good. I gave that one 3.5 stars. Oh, I read The Stories We Tell by Joanna Gaines. I gave that 3 stars. It was a really quick read, which is why I didn't DNF it. It was super short. But I think that some of it was good, but it wasn't, I guess I was expecting more maybe. I've enjoyed her other books. I thought maybe there would be, she did say that it wasn't a memoir, but I felt like maybe there were a lot of holes in the stories that she was sharing, so that was okay. And then I did have quite a few 4-star reads. The Liturgy of the Ordinary by Tish Harrison Warren. I really enjoyed that. King of Battle and Blood by Scarlett St. Clair I gave 4 stars, and I think that that's the first book in a series, and I think the next book comes out maybe in February or March, maybe. I read The Nesting Place by Michael and Smith, and I gave that 3.5 stars. I think it was a good book, but I don't know, it didn't resonate with me as much as I had hoped, I guess. Let's see. Oh, and then the last book that I read in January was Becoming Free Indeed by Ginger Volo, or Ginger Duggar Volo. I gave that 4.5 stars. I thought it was fascinating. Her moving away from the Bill Gothard Institute of, what is it called? Institute of Basic Life Principles. I loved watching the Duggars years ago, and they have definitely gone through it in the past many years, and I thought it was really fascinating to listen to her story and just how she has grown in her own faith outside of her family, and coming to find out that some of the legalism that her family is so focused on in order to be good Christians is not right. Yeah, I thought it was a good book. I think that there's a lot of haters for the Duggar family out there, and I definitely don't agree with a lot of their choices, but I find it fascinating to read some of these books by some of these very conservative families. It's really fascinating to me. So those are all of the books that I read this month. There were a lot of them. I've already read a few books in February. I'm really excited about all of the things on my reading schedule for February. If you have questions about any of the books that I talked about, or you want more information about my reading journal or how I keep track of things, just let me know in the comments, or you can email me. My contact form is always in the description box. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I don't usually share as much about my reading. I do try to share some of my reading, but I thought it would be fun to share some of the books that I read in January, and I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks, guys. Bye.